97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with Geoff Mosher, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.
I love coaching this football team. I love coaching those players in there.
Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and brought to you by PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now. They'll match your first deposit up to $250. Don't forget, the Inside the Birds pregame show Sunday at 10. Geoff Mosher, Adam Kaplan, Trey Thomas, and Greg Cosell. And right now, it is a Football at 4 with Geoff Mosher here, and we got a lot of news on this Friday. Jeffrey, how are you?
Well, I'm feeling good, Mike. Hope you guys are feeling well.
Well, we're feeling good.
I know the Eagles aren't.
Right, we're feeling better than some of 7 guys ruled out for the
Just
Eagles. 7 guys, and they're pretty. They're names that you're going to recognize. Let's go over the ramifications in them. Let's start with. Let's go with DeSean Jackson. I mean, DeSean Jackson out again. Alshon Jeffery out again. I mean, Alshon less of a surprise. I'm not saying that DeSean Jackson's a surprise, but how frustrating are the Eagles becoming of DeSean Jackson's inability to get out there?
Oh, I have to think it's been very frustrating. I mean, you're talking about now missing a third straight game, injured that hamstring kind of early, so, I mean, coming out of that one, and it feels like last year all over again, or if it doesn't feel like that, then it feels like maybe 2018 with Darren Sproles and his hamstring all over again. It's just the guy has not – what's the guy played? 4 games since coming back?
Well, in some of those games, like the Bears game last year, he played a handful of plays, couldn't finish.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's really – he really played the Washington game on opening day last year, and that was it. And other than that, he played parts of games. And then this year, the most he played in a game was, 50% of the snaps?
Right. Well, I think Washington was like 60-something. But either way, that's your point is very valid. It feels like the Eagles have been cursed since 2017 in trying to replace the speed element that they lost when I believe they traded Torrey Smith after that year, right, to Carolina. And then the following year, they signed Mike Wallace, and then he didn't stay healthy. And Shelton Gibson is a kid they drafted and has a lot of speed, but he was not a very good player. And DeSean Jackson they bring in last year. He has the core muscle injury and now the hamstring injury. And I think that they've got to be really – I don't want to say ticked. I mean, when a guy's an injury, he has an injury. But their messaging, and we talk about their messaging a lot, right, and how it's been mixed. Their messaging seemed pretty sincere and genuine a couple of weeks ago when they said it seemed like more of a tweak than a full-scale, strain. But now we're going to be going yet another week where they don't have him, and it puts the offense in a position where they really just don't have a true speed field stretcher.
Right, and then they don't have Alshon Jeffery, which I guess that whole Alshon thing. What's your take on them not putting him on the PUP list? I mean, I don't kill him because if Alshon in week 4 says, hey, I can play and he's available, you play him. And if he says I can play and he's on the PUP list and you can't, then you're kind of hamstrung. I don't think there was a guy that you were like, man, they held up a roster spot because of Alshon. But it's obvious they thought he could get back, so I guess they got to be frustrated with that as well.
You would think, and I don't kill them for that either because I agree with you. I think that there was the opportunity they felt at some time for him to come back earlier. He did have an illness last week, and I don't know if that set him back at all. But I do you have to examine their messaging. I really do believe you have to examine what is it that, Mike, you always talk about the guy from NBC, Lamonis, right? The people, the process, and what? The product?
Yes.
Yeah, well, the process here, to me, there's something off. And I'll use a different example. I brought it up in the podcast that we dropped this morning. Casey Tuhill was a 7th-round pick. Okay, not a big deal, 7th-round pick. But he was good enough to make your 53-man roster coming out. He pushed Sharif Miller out of a spot. That's a guy you drafted in the 4th round 2 years ago and never got a chance to get on the field. You pushed him out, and he's on the team, and he plays a position that you value, pass rusher, right? You want young pass rushers. And they cut Sharif Miller to make room for this guy. He's on the team, and now they've just cut him, and he winds up getting signed by Washington. So you lose out on both of those two young pass rushers that you've drafted the last 2 years. And yet, you go back to the comments Howie would make about those guys, both of them, particularly Tuhill. Oh, we liked him, relentless motor. We really think he can grow with us. And then he doesn't get the chance. So what's your messaging on that? What's your process? And I say that with what's going on now with what you asked me, because I have trouble like kind of making sense of what they're trying to do on a week-to-week basis with their team, with their personnel, who they value one day and who they don't value the next day. Because Alshon was a guy who was going to be on IR, and then reports are up, well, they're trying to trade him. I mean, he's been on the trading block because they're trying to get out of the contract. So which is it? Are you trying to get the guy healthy so you can trade him, or was he coming off an injury where most people admit are closer to the 10 to 11 month mark or whatever? I think 7 to 10 month mark, where he's in that window now, but he's on the early end of it. So do you want him on the team, or do you not want him on the team? Is he not on the 53 because you want him to help you? Or do you have him on the 53 just to show other people that, hey, he's progressing and you're trying to trade him? I lose my mind trying to figure out the motives of the team sometimes.
I can sense the frustration. But speaking of frustrating, more injuries to talk about on the offensive line. Lane Johnson, we all know the record with him is significantly better than without him, so that's clearly going to be a big loss. On top of that, Matt Pryor out, who was the weakest link, and Brown sliding in. So what do you think about the right side of this line?
Well, I actually think that you might be getting an upgrade at right guard, although Jamon Brown has not been playing. I do believe, and we'll see, I could be wrong about this. I think, though, if you ask people in the NFL, they will tell you Matt Pryor is a backup, and Jamon Brown was a starter who probably is a backup now, but more of a starter material than Matt Pryor. So you might actually be getting an upgrade. And let's face it, when they signed Jamon Brown, they knew that he had been a longtime starter and that he's a good athlete, a little bit of a good pass protector, not as much of a mauler, but a guy who can give you and hold down that spot. So I do think you're getting an upgrade there. Now, as far as right tackle, I've liked what I've seen from Jack Driscoll this year. But the one thing about rookies, and Jack in particular, is that they tend to come in and play not at the weight that they should be at. You want this guy to get stronger. You want him to get bulkier by year 2 and year 3 and develop so that you even maybe move him to guard where you can really use that athleticism that he has down the road. So he's going up, though, against he held his own well against the Steelers, who have some good pass rushers. But this Ravens front it's not as skilled per se as you get out of Bud Dupree and J.J. Watt. But in some ways it's better because it's really stout and brawny and physical. You got guys like Calais Campbell, who's 310 pounds and 6'8". You got a good kind of rusher in Matthew Judon, who doesn't get a lot of recognition like Watt and Dupree, but is just a kind of a real powerful guy. So I think that's the area I worry about with Jack Driscoll, is that his technique has been good. He's smart, but you just worried about him getting out-muscled and pushed back and having that pocket collapse because he's going up against a different breed of power in this Ravens front seven.
All right, Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds podcast dropped today, and don't forget the Inside the Birds pregame show Sunday at 10. Avonte Maddox is also out. Now, I want to ask you about that because Mills has been over at corner. It looks like Will Parks is going to be ready to play, and you wonder, is Mills now out of the safety role and he is now back to corner for good? And that what does Will Parks add, and how will that change their defense?
I don't know if he's out of the corner or the safety spot for good. I mean, I believe that when they went into the season, they had a plan to use Will Parks and to use Jalen Mills. They wanted to play 3 safeties a lot. I think, if anything, Marcus Epps is a guy that may take a step back when you have an entire healthy secondary and Avonte Maddox is ready to return.
Out. By the way, he's out this week as well.
Marcus Epps is out this week as well. That's
yes.
right. And I think Rudy Ford is out because he's on IR, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. So, at this point, it's funny because somebody told me in the offseason, he said, this is going to be the year that it's going to be more important than ever that have players who can play multiple positions. especially on defense. And so it is important. It's very helpful and beneficial for the Eagles that they have Jalen Mills, even though he's not that good of a player, that he could at least play these spots and help you hold it down if he can. That being said, if the Ravens can figure out a way to get Hollywood Brown isolated on Jalen Mills, then you're not going to be calling it a beneficial matchup. But the reality is it could be a fourth or fifth corner who's not that good either. So it's kind of it's a good thing, but it's also it's not necessarily a great thing. It allows you to hold the fourth down. But when you have this many injuries, you get guys playing out of position. That's never ideal.
What does Will Parks in your mind bring? Because to me, we talked to Nick Ferguson way back when they signed him, and one of the things he brought up was dime linebacker. And to me, maybe that's a way they can try to get Nate Geary off the field and get some help on covering these tight ends.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I know that Will Parks came here with a reputation for being able to do a lot of things, not just coverage, but blitzing, stopping the run, put him in at nickel a little bit and have him do some short area coverage. So, yeah, if he can get on that tight end and give you something a little that Nate Geary is unable to, I think we talked about the other day. I mean, 23 of 23, that's almost unfathomable that someone can allow that. So even if Will Parks can come in and make one stop, he's already done a better job than Nate Geary has all year long. So we'll see how much he plays, right? I mean, he's coming back from being out quite a long time. I was a little skeptical about how much he would be able to do. So I guess we'll just have to see.
If you were Jim Schwartz, how would you attack Lamar Jackson?
So I think I would. I was watching the Cincinnati game last week, and it's certainly no blueprint for a win for the Bengals. They only scored 7 points, but they only give up 23. And I say only, and that's because last year the Ravens averaged a lot more than that. And as I watched the game, I noticed there were times that the Raven offense struggled, and that's because with Lamar is trying to be more of a pocket quarterback this year. He hasn't run nearly as much. He still can run, and he does do damage, but not like last year when he finished 6th in the NFL in rushing. And I do notice that when you throw multiple defenders at him, if you can rush in a way that kind of rush from both angles to keep him in the pocket a little bit, and he's looking down at the field, he's a little jittery in there. I mean, he's like always in motion, frenetic. He's not a very calm rhythm thrower of the football. So that's why I think, if you try a 4-man rush all the time against this really good offensive line of the Ravens, your odds of getting a lot of pressure aren't very good. But if you can, dictate and kind of set the tone there with Lamar and get him a little rattled, there will be times where you can get him to throw an incomplete pass or throw the ball away. You just get him jittery, and that's what you want. You want him to not feel comfortable because he's a very strong arm. So he knows that he can wait a few seconds and hang on to the ball before zipping it into a window. He's amazing at that. But if you have to do that for a few seconds and the defense gets up on you, then that's what you want as a defense. So I do think Jim should probably look to force the issue a little bit more and bring a few guys at him.
That ties perfectly into this question. How much stock do you put into maybe getting out to an early lead because Lamar Jackson has struggled with coming back from behind? So let's say the Eagles, get the ball, maybe they score a touchdown and then find a way to tack on a field goal, 10-0. How much stock do you put into, getting out to an early lead against Lamar Jackson and the Ravens?
Yeah, the thing is, I think to get the Ravens out of their game plan, Hunter, you'd have to be up by at least 10 to maybe 14 points. If they're full down 7 points, 9 points, I don't think they're going to, abort ship and start trying to, reinvent their offense. So if you can get up by them by two touchdowns, maybe even 10, 11 points, then you got something going. But, then that just invites the question, well, how capable will this Eagles offense be with this patchwork offensive line, with no DeSean, no Alshon? How capable is it going to be going up against this very good Ravens defense of taking a 14-point lead at any point during the game?
Well, let me ask you this. Speaking of taking guys away, Fulgham this week. I know he's not going to have 10 for 152, but is he a big part of the offense again? Or is, Baltimore 3 weeks now say, all right, we got something for this guy?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I think Baltimore does have something for him, and not like a double team, but you compare him to the Steelers' corners. The Steelers' corners benefit from that front four rush. Joe Hayden did not run well last week, and their corners in general just don't compare to what the Ravens have at cornerback. Marlon Humphrey is an amazing corner. He's very, very good and very physical as well. In fact, last week against the Bengals, he spent a lot of time in the slot because they just put him on Tyler Boyd. And I think he does move in because they have Jimmy Smith and Marcus Peters who can play outside. Smith plays like kind of a hybrid corner, nickel safety role because he's up there in age a little bit. But the thing that stands out about the Ravens secondary is they are physical, just like the front seven. I mean, that's the whole Raven mentality. Marlon especially. Marlon will get up in you and put his hands on you and press you and, do everything he can that's not illegal to do coverage. So some of those, some of the Fulgham catches last week were Travis going up to getting the ball. The others, he was able to kind of sit down in the middle of his own and catch the ball. He's not going to get any free rides on Sunday from the Ravens defense, and he's going to be going up against a much better caliber of cornerback.
By the way, this just out from the Eagles. The Eagles have placed Matt Pryor on the COVID list. So he has been in close contact with an infected person or persons, which means I guess you got to keep an eye on if anything else happens with the Eagles and COVID situations like there has been throughout the league. We mentioned Jamal Brown's going to be playing there because there's been, by the way, on that real quick, Moshe, there's been a lot of guys listed with illness this week.
Yes, and so my understanding on that was that, and because I checked into that, is that, and you're probably seeing this around the league too, and maybe not notice if you're not looking at other teams' injury reports, but they tell guys if anything's going on, if you got the sniffles, if you're having an allergic reaction, if there's anything going on that you don't feel 100%, don't come to the office. That's basically the motto. So, I mean, you're in late fall. People do have allergy issues. People do start to get the sniffles now. It's getting a little chillier at night. You can wake up with a headache and say, you know what, I'm not taking the chance. So, I mean, I imagine, look, I don't know. You hope nobody's abusing the system and just doesn't feel like going to work one day and makes a call and says, oh, I'm not feeling well. I imagine that players are just being very responsible, and teams are as well, saying, like, we're just not going to take any risks.
All right. By the way, Lane Johnson out as well. It's going to be Jack Driscoll getting the start there. So this is going to be the fifth different offensive line. And also Duke Riley is out. Now, as much as we talked about linebacker this week and from the last game, I guess with Riley being out, you're going to have to put somebody else in that spot, another linebacker out there. So what do you think the linebacking spot looks like? I guess this means a lot more. If this is the week you thought Geary might get his snaps reduced, you're probably going to be disappointed.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Nate Geary is not having his snaps reduced. Obviously, he and you would have to think Alex Singleton, with T.J. Edwards still being out, would have to be the primary linebackers, your two linebackers who are on the field. And if they go to a three, which they will, they should be in a decent number of three linebacker formations because the Ravens kind of run a base offense. They play a lot of two tight ends. They play a lot of, they have a fullback, Patrick Ricard. So they'll go heavy up front and try to run. So I imagine that Sean Bradley, the rookie from Temple, will be that third linebacker in. And he's made a few good plays against the run so far. People keep saying to me, why doesn't he get more time? Why doesn't he replace Nate Geary? And I keep saying, because run defense is not their problem. That's not the issue. So I don't know how good of a cover linebacker Sean Bradley is. He's not one of those guys that was, unlike most Eagles draft picks, he's not one of those twitched up guys who was just traits everywhere. He was more of a linebacker who played in a good defense and had good instincts and leadership and could make tackles and everything like that. So I don't know what kind of coverage acumen that he has.
How do you like this matchup in terms of the Eagles defensive line against the Ravens O-line? Do you think there's a possibility of, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, Avery, Barnett having themselves a good game?
Yeah, the possibility is there. They need to, Hunter. I mean, this has to be a game where Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave and Malik Jackson really set the tone, because you can funnel some of your pass rush. You can, the way they run the wide nine and have the guys attacking from the edges, it'll cause quarterbacks, especially ones like Lamar, who may want to take off to run up the middle. And so you need that middle clogged, and that's what those guys are there to do. It's supposed to be the best, DT trio in the league. I don't want to say they haven't played like it. Malik Jackson has played well. Fletcher has not played like his normal self, but I did go back and watch the tape against Pittsburgh, and I do feel like he was actually more disruptive than I originally thought. And there were a couple of times I thought he was outright held, and they just didn't call it. So I'm not picking up for him. I'm not saying he's playing at an all-pro level, but he's still a force to be reckoned with there. But Hargrave's got to pick it up too now as we get closer to the middle of the season, and he's coming back from the 2 injuries that he had. I would love to see him really have a dominant, assertive game where you get like, okay, I get why this guy is the prize free agent that they signed.
All right, Geoff Mosher, of course, Football at 4 right here on the Sports Bash, the Inside the Birds podcast. It dropped this morning at 6 o'clock. A new one will drop on Monday at 6, and you can, of course, check them out for the pregame show at 10 o'clock on Facebook and social media. They start that pregame, and you get the last couple of weeks, you got some breaking news on there with Adam Kaplan, Jeff, Greg Cosell, and Trey Thomas does a great job breaking down all of the matchups to watch in that game. And one other thing, obviously the injuries have been a huge, huge problem here. Is there any do you think that the team is just kind of saying, look, we're within striking it, we just got to hold water, and once we get everybody back healthy, we're going to be okay? Is that the mindset, or do they understand that this team is not very good?
I don't know if you can have that mindset. I try to say that too sometimes, Mike. I'll say, oh man, wait till Avonte Maddox and Will Parks are back in this secondary, and how good that'll be then. But we always tend to forget or not count the guys who are going to get hurt between now and then, because it seems like every week 2 or 3 guys, new guys, get hurt. And so just when you're waiting for Isaac Seumalo and Lane Johnson to come back, then it's maybe Jason Kelsey or somebody else, Darius Slay or something. He had a concussion. Hopefully he'll be all right and cleared to play. But if they're banking on that, then they haven't been paying attention for the last 2 or 3 years, and especially the whole league this year. I mean, every team, some more than others, but every team is dealing with a lot of injuries.
Well, it's a 7-point. Actually, it's up to 9.5 now. It bounced up to 9.
Oh, my God,
yep.
9.5?
Bounced up to 9.5 when the injury report came out. You're at home, 9.5. I mean, you feel that disrespected? I mean, do you see a path to victory here?
Only in the any given Sunday kind of way. I really don't think it's a good matchup. I think it's a bad matchup for the Eagles, even worse than the Steelers, because this defense, this secondary of the Ravens is a lot better. So it's hard to think that you're going to get, like you mentioned, 152 yards out of Fulgham again. Don't see them running the ball real well. And defensively, the way they've played tight ends and action teams, I think we all know how they fared against them this year. So I get the line. I think that's fair. And again, any given Sunday, sure, but no, I don't see a good outcome for the Eagles on Sunday.
All right, and they'll have more breakdown, obviously, on this game on the Inside the Birds pregame show. And, of course, Moshe is back next week to break it all down on Wednesday. Andrew DeCecco's here on Monday and Tuesday. Adam Kaplan on Thursday for Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. All right, Jeff. Well, the injuries seem to constantly be the story. We'll see how it all unfolds on Sunday. Thanks, pal.
You got it, guys. Have a good weekend.